My name is Colin Kippen, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Indian Education Association, and I wanted to welcome all of you, to thank you for coming, and I also want to thank you for bringing the good weather. We have an incredible day of activities today, tomorrow as well. We will be at a reception tomorrow evening with USET as well, starting at 7 o'clock, and then on Wednesday we'll all be on the Hill together. There is just so much. There is so much hope. There is so much love. There is so much aloha in the room today, and I want to thank you for bringing your energy and your knowledge and your wisdom here today. Without any more delay, I would like to introduce to you Mary Jane Oatman-Wak, who is the president of the National Indian Association, and she will be addressing you now, as well as she will be addressing the nation, because this address will be broadcast nationally as well. So without any further ado, would you please welcome Mary Jane Oatman-Wak, our president.
Thank you to our Creator for gathering us all here on this day. Fellow board members, Executive Director Colin Kippen, staff, and members of the National Indian Education Association, it is an honor to provide the 2011 State of the Native Education Address. Inuwat Niktwas, Mary Jane Oatman-Wak, and I'm an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe of Idaho and a descendant of the Delaware Nation. I currently serve as the coordinator for Indian education for the state of Idaho, and I'm a proud mother of 2 young sons, Jackson, who is a 3rd grader and 8 years old, and my son Wayne, who is 2. They are here with me today, as well as all of my family. I want to thank the board members of the NIEA for your efforts in these last several months. I also want to thank you, NIEA members, for your patience and your resolve. I know that you will find the growing pains and the fruits of the transitions and the labor that we've gone through will be well worth it. Your support is allowing NIEA to change the conversation about the impact of Native children and Native education. I would also, on behalf of the NIEA Board of Directors, like to thank our families for the sacrifices that they go through and that they endure so that we can be servant leaders to our country. We are on the brink of incredible change and are all gathered with a single goal and purpose: to build our nations. So on this day, I speak to all of you about an issue that is central to the future of building those nations, and that is our foundation, the important structures on which our nations are built. The foundation in which this occurs is through the right of self-determination, not just in terms of administrative control over the federal programs with predetermined priorities, but self-determination that grows from your community's desire to shape your own futures and improve the quality of lives for this and many generations to come. This foundation reflects Stephen Cornell's chapter of Colonial Legacies, Indigenous Solutions, where he discusses the responsibilities. Under conditions of genuine self-determination, what does or does not happen increasingly depends on what they do and less on what the federal government or outsiders do. And so the conversation begins about what we do for our Native children. There are many layers of policy, funding, and politics that impact the education of Native children in this nation, but NIEA has never wavered from the pillar of advocacy, the grassroots that founded our organization, for providing that voice to ensure that the federal trust responsibility for the education of our people is upheld. We will continue to lead in this area, but are emerging into new scopes as an organization to shift gears and provide the customer service that our members deserve. The U.S. Constitution recognizes the legal distinction of Indian people. The trust relationship, it's existed between the United States government and the American Indian ever since. In administering this trust, the various federal agencies are responsible for preserving, protecting, and guaranteeing Indian rights and property. All of these federal programs for Indians share two purposes: the fulfillment of specific treaty provisions and the commitment to the Indian tribes to improve our social and economic conditions. The pendulum has shifted back and forth in terms of the fulfillment of these responsibilities. Under the Obama administration, we have unprecedented conversations about Native education policy reform, yet we proceed with caution. We know and are fully aware of the changing political environment and the increasing budget deficits that we face. The Office of Management and Budget has directed all of our agencies to reduce their current budgets by 5%. We must stand together to ensure that Native education is held harmless from these cuts, again reinforcing the unique legal and moral obligation of the United States to assist our people in the protection of our property and our rights. This trust has as its primary purpose the continued survival of Indian tribes and their governments, our governments. The trust relationship existing between the federal government and Indian tribes governs that special, unique relationship. Since the introduction of colonial education to our people, the curriculum in Indian schools offered no native languages, culture, or history. The same languages that tie Native people to the land and their prehistories, our prehistories, are endangered. Endangered, and some people even say on the brink of extinction. NIEA supports Native nations' recognition that culture and language are interrelated, and that the government's past record of denying our culture and languages were just a part of that federal policy to destroy our traditional way of life. Let's talk about breach of that trust responsibility. The initial attempt at educating American Indians was to fulfill a mission to change our cultures, traditions, and values, our ways of life. Kill the Indian, save the man. In many instances, our languages were banned and our people were punished for speaking them. I was very honored to have many elders share these experiences and stories with me. The late Nez Perce elder, Hin Matuya Lachit Lakai Lakai, or Irvin Waters I, shared with me his experiences on his first day of boarding school. He arrived and saw his brother, who he had not seen in over a year, and sat next to him, turned to him to greet him and to took attempt in the language gifted to him by his creator, only to be spanked for speaking that language. Throughout Native nations, schools were established as an attempt to civilize and convert, yet every attempt at destroying the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian cultures has been met with failure. We have survived. We are living. Early approaches at changing our people are explained in an 1899 statement by a top Indian Affairs official. The settlement policy of the government is to break up the reservations, destroy tribal relations, settle Indians upon their own homesteads, incorporate them into national life, and deal with them not as nations and tribes or bands, but as individual citizens. The American Indian is to become the Indian American. This statement makes it very clear. The Indian education policies have historically had two thrusts: isolation and assimilation. Both of these thrusts have been challenged by Native people. Indians today are deeply concerned with getting effective and relevant education for our children. We want our educational systems to reflect the tribal values and our way of life, and we rightfully feel we ought to have a greater influence and control over our children's education and the policy that drives the systems. In 1928, the most significant investigation ever conducted in the field of Indian affairs, the Merriam Report, was published. Among its major findings were the reality that Indians were receiving poor quality of services, especially health and education, from the public officials charged with upholding that trust responsibility. The report suggests that public schools, with their traditional curriculums, were not the answer. The Indian family and social structures must be strengthened, not destroyed. The qualifications in Indian schools must be high, not poor or average. The federal school systems must be a model of excellence. The experiences highlighted in the Merriam Report and the history and abuse of poverty are still of great concern because our children and families still feel that residual effect of that era. The federal school systems and the federal government's termination and assimilation policies were a failure. You are all evident of that failure. Current data shows that many of our tribal students suffer from disproportionately low achievement scores, graduation rates, and educational attainment levels. And our dropout statistics have a great impact on the tribal nations and the national economy. According to the study for the Alliance for Excellence Education, if half of the class of 2008 dropouts actually graduated, they would have earned a combined $23.9 million more than if they had not graduated. Of that $23.9 million, $16.8 million would have been spent in the communities, and $6.5 million of those dollars would have been invested each year. Home purchases would have increased by $61.5 million. This money that would have been poured back, this is money that would have been poured back into our Native communities, improving efforts to effectively manage natural resources, improve the reach of our tribal governments, and innovate for the future by developing additional resources for our nations. The education deficit that continues to plague our students is the impetus for change and the reason that all of us are gathered and stepping up to the plate in the management of education policies and programs for our children. The National Indian Education Association and the National Congress of American Indians will continue to work together to find joint strategies and solutions to ensure the voices of our nations are heard. And so I talked a little bit about that breach of the sacred trust. Now we're going to talk about restoring that trust. NIEA is on a relentless pursuit of progress to restore the sacred trust, and we're doing more behind the scenes to maintain that momentum. We are looking to move forward in this effort in 4 ways. First, we will increase the emphasis on culture and language instruction by increasing data and research about what works best for our Native students. Second, we unite to restore the trust by increasing local and tribal control of Indian education. Third, we must join together, both with our tribes and also collaborate with Native education organizations and our governmental agencies to do what's best for our children. And fourth, our success depends on you, capturing and telling the stories of our children to provide the successful demonstration models and as beacons for other tribal communities that are struggling. We are starting this endeavor with the lifeblood of our organization, all of you, our members, to make sure that the benefits and services align with our mission and support their efforts to increase educational opportunities and success for our children. We are encouraged that the U.S. Department of Education has conducted the tribal leaders consultations and that the key findings and data will be an integral piece in driving the much needed reform in the upcoming reauthorization of the Elementary Secondary Education Act. We will continue to advocate for the expansion of opportunities for Native nations to set our own priorities and manage our programs, dollars, and systems that increases accountability. Our Native communities have a better idea of what's wrong and what priorities should be, yet many of us continue to find ourselves competing with each other for funding that does not align with our priorities as a short-term means of improving the lives of our nation's citizens. Our tribal leaders are stepping forward with a unified voice to say that they want to say what we want in the co-management of our nation's greatest natural resources, our children. As one tribal leader so eloquently stated it, and if we don't perform, hold us accountable. Collaborations and partnerships are essential when putting the Native self back into self-determination.